My name is Farnia Fernell. Together, we're here to deliver refreshing and insightful, just in time workday session meant to set you up for greater productivity. Today, our topic is measuring to manage. Before we get started, I just want to tell you a little bit more about me. After years as a Fortune 100 global leader in financial services, I realized there was a gap in my understanding. And I'm a first gen, a systems engineer trained in process and technology, but my difference in culture often caused me to struggle with a lot of unwritten rules that help the best leaders and the best teams to thrive. So, about 12 years ago, I used what I knew and I studied a lot more. I got coached and I formed the Lenserf Group. And in that time, we've worked with thousands of leaders in 44 countries to soar past their limitations. And that body of work is what led to leadership COGS. Essentially, we think about that as the four pillars that, when executed regularly, they keep leaders in a state of high performance. What does it stand for? C is for celebrating consistency, which is a really key attribute of high performance. O is for taking ownership of not only your being, but also the actions that you take. G is for growing out of that glue, the glue that keeps me and you and others stuck. S is for the stamina to stretch. Anytime, if you stretch your arms, stretch your legs, or otherwise, there tends to be just a little bit of discomfort when you stretch. So today our focus is on measurement. And measurement can talk to any one of these letters in COGS. I'll tell you a brief story. I enjoy running. And so a lot of my references tie back to running. I was never a professional athlete or any kind of a school athlete, but I enjoy it. And in 1954, Roger Bannister, you may have heard of him, he became the first person in recorded history to run a mile in under 4 minutes. And at the time, it was unheard of running an under 4 minute mile. No one had ever done it. And the thought of actually doing it was like, oh, why should we even pay attention to that? Because it's not able to be done. But after he broke that record, within a year, many others started, actually, several others started breaking that record. But since that time, if you flash forward, that record has been broken more than 1,700 additional times. So a question could come up, well, was no one really trying hard enough and that's why it wasn't broken? It's highly likely that since it had not been done, people probably assumed that it couldn't be done. And in reality, we're saying Roger Bannister did it for the first time, and I don't want to take away that focus because he's written books and before his passing about this effort. But in reality, perhaps other people had done it, but it had not been measured. But in this instance, it had been measured. And again, within a year, three runners broke the record. The next year, I think that was the year of the Olympics, five additional people broke that record. So you ask, what does this have to do with measurement? Well, Roger Bannister, he broke that goal of beating four into a couple different pieces. He broke it into pace, splits, wind, and recovery. And I'm not here to talk about those things, but I am talking about measurement and measurement so that we can manage things that we're pursuing. So let's talk about that. First, goals, anchoring your goals. When you start walking or decide to drive a car or get ready to take a metro, there's usually a destination or at least some kind of a distance, like, oh, I'd like to go 2 miles, or I'm going, within 5 miles of here. And with modern technology, you likely can set your GPS or Google Maps before you go. And when you do so, Maps, this app, will tell you with incredible accuracy exactly how far you're going to travel and when you're going to arrive at your destination. So when we think about your work and your day to day, you can apply those same skills, not quite with Google Maps, but create a dashboard so that you know when you're going to arrive at your destinations or your goals. Measuring helps you to manage expectations for yourself and honestly for whoever might be waiting for you on the other end. And for those of you that join, those people waiting might be your team, it might be your organization, it might be the marketplace. If you're on task to report results externally, if you're thinking about home, it might be your family waiting for you to report something. So I'll just back up to goals. It's important to have, anytime you talk to me, I tend to talk about goals, but it's important to have goals in the first place and to be anchored that something that serves as your true north. Where are you going? Anchored to something that ties to your intention and your aspirations in as much detail as possible. So I say this, I'm like, oh, I have goals. They're recorded in the system. They're recorded somewhere, but how often do you look at those goals? Goals can provide you with a means to free you from other distractions. So many times when I'm talking or teaching time management, I talk about four quadrants. And when I do that, I talk about, quadrant one, this is the Eisenhower matrix. Quadrant one is essentially emergencies. Quadrant two is being planned and planned full. And we're talking about goals in quadrant two, something that informs your direction and keeps you free from distractions. That's how you know it's quadrant two and not quadrant three, which is other people's problems. Staying anchored in what your intentions are and where you're going, because anything else may likely be noise. Then again, this is leadership COGS, and we're generally talking about measuring things again in the office or at work. So having these goals means having motivation or being able to motivate your people, motivate people around you, or influence other people. We all have mirror neurons. So how you show up and what you're doing and your intention or lack thereof influences other people. Your goals can make review cycles. So often people are uncomfortable in going into reviews or talking about like postmortems or retrospectives. But when you have a clear goal and you're anchored to that goal or at least that direction, it makes even review cycles a lot less anxiety inspiring. You're able to discuss, hey, are we on track? Or does something need to shift? And you're able to assess if that goal is still right for you. So as I'm talking here, I'm just going to pause for a second and ask you, what are your goals? And if you've never written one down before, this can serve as your opportunity to do that, to take it out of here, your head, and put it somewhere else that might even temporarily, just for the course of this session that you're here with me, make it visible. So that's one. What else? So if you have a goal, that's great. Now you might be wondering, okay, well, what do I do with it? Well, you have the goal. Well, let's reverse engineer what you might track or what the metrics might be. You see, your metrics are going to tell you what you're trying to achieve and what outcome actually matters to your team, your department, or even your company. For example, let's say your goal is to improve like client retention, and you're not just tracking like, let's say, the number of client calls that come in about something. You might be looking at, do those clients actually stay with us? Do they renew with us? Do they continue working with us? You might even track like response times. Then you can ask yourself, what are the inputs that drive success as it relates to this goal? What are the inputs that drive success and what are the indicators? And if you've never heard of indicators or talked about indicators in the past, and I'll go back to that client retention example and say, there might be lead metrics. If you're thinking about client retention, lead metrics might predict future performance. So that might be the number of proactive outreach calls that come through. And there might be lag metrics. So you've got that goal, but the goal is going to just point to something, and then lag metrics will point to something that already happened. So what actually happened? So this might be something that you look at in a retrospective or a postmortem. And that might be, hey, what was the revenue for this quarter? And that looking at that revenue says we're doing something well or we're not doing something well. But the metric is the revenue. The other thing when thinking about tracking metrics is look for bottlenecks that can affect your metric. Look for gaps. Look for risks. And oftentimes, when you look in those places, you might see an opportunity create a metric. If this risk happens, this is something that we should be paying attention to. That's how we know the risk is happening. Another thing when we're talking about what needs to be tracked is who needs the information. Sometimes when we're operating, we operate in a silo. We come in, you're on autopilot. You come in, you do what you have always done, and then you end your day and you go back to whatever you were doing before. Then you come back in and you're doing what you're doing. So we operate in these spaces where we're repeating behaviors or getting the work done, but maybe not considering if we have a goal, who needs the information that's tied to this? Who are we doing this for? And why do they need it? What is it that they might want to see in order for them to make the decision that they need to make? So if you're a leader and you're handing something off to another department or handing something off to another peer or another leader, why do they need what you're handing off? And whatever that is might tie to a metric that you might consider tracking. How many times have they complained about what you've handed off, or how many times have they said thank you? Oh wow, your team is amazing. That gives you an indication, and that indicator can serve as a metric. So I mentioned behavior, and this is COGS that we're always talking about behavior. So I'm going to throw this out there is when we're talking about what needs tracking, you might also track how you show up to maintain continuous performance. Because the how you show up is, in fact, a behavioral metric that you can consider assigning to your goal. How you do something affects how other people do their things. I mentioned mirror neuron. People respond based on how you're showing up. Are you showing up with urgency? Are you showing up with a can do attitude? Are you showing up with regret? Are you showing up frustrated? How are you showing up? So, how do you want to be while you're pursuing your goal? I'll tell you a non-work story, but I was dealing with a stressful family situation, and I knew that my default tendency is to revert to getting things done. And when I'm in autopilot, it's getting things done as quickly and efficiently as possible. That is what my mind wants to revert to. But because I knew that about myself, I also knew that in this particular situation, that wasn't what was needed. And again, in this particular situation and this challenge, that wasn't that attitude of like, let's go, wasn't what was going to serve the family members that were involved. So I had to actually pause and go out of my way. I'm saying out of my way because my mind was ready to go, but my wanting to set a metrics that mattered had me pause and then set a goal to experience joy while being with that challenging situation. I'm going to repeat that. My goal was to experience joy while being with this challenging situation. That was, the situation was less than joyful. So to challenge myself in that way was a real challenge. Okay. And so I had to assign a metric, and what I assigned to that was that in every interaction, I had to just be at least once. And you're like, what does that mean, Farnia? What does it mean to just be? It means when I was ready to do and to fix and to correct and to expect the rest of the family to do and to be, like, to keep on moving, I just needed to sit down and take the pulse of the room and to relax or even sometimes crack a joke, just to be with instead of doing for the situation, for the benefit. The work was the being. So I ask you, what behavioral metric might you want to track about yourself? Is it your tendency to go, go, go? Is it your tendency not to respond until someone else says something? Is it your tendency to please others and then feel regret because no one paid attention to what you needed? What is your tendency? And set a metric. You have the opportunity to do that. Set a metric for your goal. And then I just want to caution you against this. So, vanity metrics, we all have them, all right? We all have them. Many times when leaders they choose to do something big, they might choose a path that looks good on paper, but sometimes means very, very little. And sometimes it might overtrack with way too much detail because, like, oh, look at all the detail that we put behind this. And it might be a vanity metric. Sometimes it may have totally misaligned metrics, but it's tied to something that you might not know. So I just caution you as you start thinking about this to watch out for vanity metrics. A couple things you can ask yourself is, does your metric reflect actual activity or does it reflect impact? So being busy is not a metric. Oh, I'm so busy. That's not a metric. What is the impact of your busy? Being busy all the time, but not getting anything done, you still didn't move the needle. If you're feeling really busy or feeling restless because there's so much to do, chances are you might be focused on something that is tied to a vanity metric. Just check on that. Another example is, sometimes people count the number of meetings. Like, oh, I was in meetings all day. Show me your hand if that's you. If that's you. I was in meetings all day. Okay. And in those meetings, how many decisions were made in those meetings? Because it's likely the decisions that are moving the ball forward and not necessarily the number of meetings. Or in certain instances, if you're a software company and you're like, oh, the number of downloads, we had all these downloads. Okay, well, is it about the downloads or is it about the number of users or customers that you retained after a number of days? If it's just the downloads, that doesn't really tell the whole picture. It's a portion of the picture. Another thing you can ask yourself is, does this metric move the business forward or my business or my goal forward? And if this number goes up, do we actually improve? And if your answer is no, even there, you might be looking at a vanity metric. There's the idea of manipulation. So a lot of us work in teams, and history has shown that sometimes the best intentions are ruined when there's temptation to edit or manipulate the target. So that can happen. Let's talk about the management part. So we're measuring to manage. Let's talk about management briefly. Managing tactically may mean like looking at a dashboard or some type of report. We all create reports often. The real management might actually come in the messaging, managing the expectations. I mentioned that a little while ago. Managing expectations, which tend to be the feelings or even the behaviors around the metrics. Could also be managing activities, and that tends to be numbers on some kind of a dashboard that you're looking at, seeing if it goes up, down, or stay stagnant. How can you communicate? You can start with the why. So oftentimes when delivering news. If you look at any, quarterly reports that are delivered on, either they're written or they're spoken, and when they're spoken, usually starts with a why. You could be a nonprofit, a for-profit, it doesn't matter. Why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? Why does your measurement or why does your metric matter? What goal is it tied to, and what story does it tell? You can continue with, what does good actually look like? If you set a target, don't assume that everybody knows what that target is. You have an opportunity to restate your benchmarks, restate what is healthy, what is not healthy, and what is your data showing, and what is your gut and your sentiment showing. And that ties to the behavioral metrics. You have an opportunity to link it to actual actions. So, what should we do differently? Because this is what our measurement is saying. This is what our metrics are showing. When we're communicating that, it's not only the number or the behavior, it's what should we do differently? So it's the forward movement. We're talking COGS. COGS keep on moving. It's the forward movement as a result of this data. So we're coming to the end of our time together. And I'll just go back. In a McKinsey study, it said that organizations that use clear performance metrics and openly communicate progress are 2.5 times more likely to outperform their peers. That's a McKinsey study. And it allows us to think, where are we in that? Are we communicating regularly, financial and operationally? And that third tier, that third leg, is behaviorally. How do we want to be so that we can sustain those other things? So go back, anchor your goals. If we're talking about measuring anything, start with a goal, identify what needs to be tracked. Watch out for vanity. Ego is a big, 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 big derailer often. Communicate your metrics as clearly as you can to make sure everyone's on the same page, or at least as close to the same page as possible. And then reach out. I encourage you to reach out if you might be challenged creating manageable metrics, or even creating milestones. So we have metrics, we have goals, but everything doesn't happen. When we talked about breaking that 4-minute mile, there were a couple things that went into it. It wasn't just the actual running. It was the weather conditions. It was other things. If you need support, breaking things up into milestones so that you can manage your metrics, feel free to reach out. And I thank you for joining today. I'll be back on June 9th for another episode of Leadership COGS, where we're going to talk again. Actually, I'd love to get your comments. I just saw a note coming. I'm happy to get your comments. Feel free to reach out and share with me if there are other topics you'd like to cover. We're going to enter Q3 with a whole new series. As always, thanks again for being here. Take care and be well.